Kia ora tātou katoa. I know I'm in a different spot today. I'm probably going to be in different spots each time that I do a recording until I find a spot that I like. But this is where I'm usually at when I'm doing my coaching and stuff. But nonetheless, we're going to just jump straight in to this corridor, to this conversation today. I really wanted to talk a little bit more about my birth stories. And I'm feeling called to share these because with each story, yes, I was physically giving birth to my children, but I was also birthing new versions of myself. Yeah. And I'm feeling really called to share each of those, what those pregnancies were like for me, but also what those birthing moments were like for me, both physically, like I'm going to share them too, because each of my births were real different, but also what new versions of me were also being birthed at the same time. And I really wish there was so many more conversations like this being talked about out loud and sharing these experiences, because I know that each of us has our own birth stories, right? Every journey that we all go on, every experience that we feel, yeah, it might be different, but we also never know just who else might have had a similar experience to us. And like in personal development world, connections, like storytelling, right? Pūraku, and creating those connections is one of the most pivotal things that we can do as human beings so that we know we're not alone. So I really hope that by me diving into these conversations, it starts like awakening some things like in yourself. If you're a wahine listening to this, I hope it just, yeah, it starts awakening these moments in our own or in your own birth stories and your own pregnancy journeys and what you learned through that, right? What new versions of you were birthed, what you maybe also let go of, right? I really want these conversations to start sparking back. Okay. So I'm going to start with my first pregnancy. So we've already heard the story about how I found out I was pregnant, how I shared, how I let people know, what I was scared of, the judgments, discriminations, all of that. But my pregnancy with my eldest was challenging. It was difficult. It was hard. I actually lost weight before I put weight on, and I could barely eat anything. I could barely keep anything down. I was living off yogurt a lot of the time. And just honestly, I was exhausted. I was super exhausted during the pregnancy with my son. And I actually was also still at high school. Yeah. So I carried on going to high school even right through my whole entire pregnancy. And my high school was amazing and they were great. And one thing I do remember though, I remember going on this like, geography trip down in Wellington, happy as, and I didn't realize how much walking we'd be doing. And I was walking around Wellington, happy as with my geography class, but also experiencing, I was going to say a morning sickness, but it was more like a day sickness and still showing up even whilst being hapu, right? I was still walking to school. I still did all my subjects, PE, art, English, everything. I still did those things, even though I was happy and pregnant and experiencing nauseousness, morning sickness, wanting to throw up all the time. Like I continued to show up all throughout my pregnancy, even though I could have chosen not to, right? It would have been so easy for me to just stay home, get pregnant, and all the things. And yeah, I could have chosen to do that too. But there was like this fire in me that was like, no, I'm going to keep going to school until I literally no longer choose to want to go or literally physically cannot. And I did. I did stop going to school when I was around 6, 7 months pregnant. And I was like, all right, team, like I'm tapping out now. And again, my school was really cool. They let me leave if I needed to leave, if I wasn't feeling very well. But half the time, more than half the time I stayed. That's how safe I felt. That's how welcome I felt. That was my experience being hapu at could have. Anyway, at school, I had one teacher and I like hustled him and I'm like, hey, mister, like, I'm so hungry. Can you buy me this from the tuck shop? And then he would. And then I'd be like, oh, can you like please buy so and so one too so that I don't got to share? And he's like, okay, girl. And then so we would. So, like, honestly, I was super grateful on my pregnancy journey while still being at high school. And so that was that pregnancy. Right at the beginning, when I found out, I did not make very good choices, though. I chose to continue to smoke. I chose to continue to drink alcohol. And these are things that I am so sad about that I continue to do. But again, I was 15 years old and none the wiser. Literally everyone around me that I knew at that time was also doing that. So that's what I saw at the same time. I still hold a little bit of guilt and shame and mummy for those actions, even though my big baby, my son, I'm going to stop calling him baby, but even though he has grown up and he is amazing and he's such an incredible kid, that was what 15-year-old me decided to do. Yeah. And so whilst I'm grateful, I ended up slowing down and stopping those things during my pregnancy. That was not the case at the beginning. And again, I am super grateful for the supports that I had around me. I had such an amazing midwife. I had such amazing support. So, like, my neighbors, my mom, my dad, like, I had all these people loving me and being around me. Even my baby's other grandparents and his other side of the whānau, like, they were all there and they wrapped so much support and love around me. Again, I know that not everybody gets that, but I am so grateful in hindsight that I managed to have those supports around me because life was already pretty chaotic and I could have easily stayed in that kind of chaos. And I was going to say I couldn't imagine what life would be like without those supports, but I can, because there were pockets in my life and in those pregnancies and on my mum journey where I did not have those kinds of supports around. Anyways, I remember finally going into labor and I remember being in so much pain and I'm like, oh, nah, this is just Braxton Hicks, right? That's what I was trying to tell myself at the time because I was 10 days before my due date. And I remember my neighbor Case coming over, my sister Case, and she's like, babe, I think that you are in labor. And I was just like, no, 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 no. Like, I can't be in labor. I'm 10 days off. It's way too early. And I was like freaking out and pacing. And my then boyfriend at the time was playing on his games, bloody gaming. And his mum was there and my mum was there. And it was just quite a lot of chaos going on in the first parts of my labor, right? And I didn't know what to do. And we rang the midwife and she came. I wasn't quite far along yet, but the pains were just really getting to me. And again, I was 16 at this stage. So I gave birth when I was 16. And I just remember freaking out and my brain just being full on chaos because first baby, right? I didn't know what the hell to expect or what to do. And we eventually got up to the hospital. Now, I'm not going to lie, a lot of this birth story, there are so many blanks, but there are also so many pivotal things that I remember. Now, I really wanted my dad there, but he actually wasn't due to come down till a little bit after. So he did unfortunately miss the birth of my son. And I had my mum and I had baby's other nan with me and it was freaky and it was scary. And actually not only that, I had like my friends coming in and out of the hospital. I do remember that. I remember one of my friends bought me McDonald's, but by that time I wasn't even allowed to eat it because I had gone so far. I ended up getting an epidural, so I didn't feel like my lower half of my body, and I they gave me that epidural too because I kept passing out from the contractions that I was having. So they have these like scales, right? And it kept going off the page, and I was like almost passing out every single contraction because that's how powerful they were. That's how strong they were. And I was in labor for actually such a long time, by the way. I think I went into labor, trying to remember now, the morning of giving birth. So maybe I was in labor for 12 to 14 hours, give or take, and it just felt so long. And baby just would not progress past 8 centimeters. There was even a time where he would like digress and go back in and then progress again. And it was just scary. All right. I was just so scared at 16 and in so much pain. And so then my waters actually didn't pop. That's why you hear me talk about it at the beginning. My waters actually did not pop. And so they popped my waters when I was in there, and it was brown. And it then became like real fast paced. They were like, we need to whip you into the emergency room right now. You really need to have a C-section because both of your heart rates are high. We've popped his waters and it's all brown. It's not safe. We need to do this very, very fast. And I'm drugged up, right? I'm so drugged up. I barely remember what was going on. I do remember them asking me questions, but I'm just like, yes, yes, because chaos, okay? Pure chaos. My mum came into the emergency room with me where they delivered my son, and I remember being so scared. I remember just tears streaming down my face. I remember fearing because I didn't know if my baby was going to be okay, if I was going to be okay. They whipped us in. They put my robe up, right? They put the little roby robe up so I couldn't really see what was going on. My mum was up by my head and I was holding her hand, and I remember like glancing down and seeing blood everywhere. It was super scary. I could even feel, right? I could feel them inside my body. Like I could feel the tugging. I could feel it, just not the pain. Because I was awake when they did this emergency C-section as well. And I remember that, just feeling it all minus the pain. And it was so fast though. It was very fast. And then I remember baby coming up. And then I remember not knowing where he was. And I'm like, what's going on? And I was freaking out. And then we heard my baby cry. And then he was up here. And then he was by me. And I was finally holding my baby earthside in a moment of time that we both almost died. Right? That's why they whipped us in there. Because we both almost died because of the stress, because of our heart rates being way too high, because of his sac being in like brown and stuff, because he had, just all that was going on. But we didn't. And I'm this young 16-year-old holding my baby at the hospital finally. And it was like a sigh of relief having my baby. And I remember we went back into the room, and I remember not knowing what the fuck I was doing. Right. Before having my own babies, I did not want children. Okay. Wasn't my favorite thing in the world. And I was a teenager. So odds, right? But I remember holding him, and I remember having him, and I remember my mum crying so much. And I remember his other nanny being in there. And I remember my friends coming to see me. And y'all might ask, where was Dad? Again, he wasn't there. Okay. He was not there when I gave birth. It all happened very fast and it was scary. And I remember when he did show up, he tried to take the baby out of the hospital, and I'm stuck there. Couldn't even move. Legs couldn't move because I had an epidural, and then plus all the other drugs that they drugged me up on when I had that emergency C-section. And he was trying to take the baby out of the hospital, and I was getting so frazzled and I was getting so scared. And I was just so grateful that like his mum was there and my mum was there, and they're like, what are you doing? Because I couldn't even move. Yes. But I remember 16-year-old me being so upset, so sad. I'd just gone through this traumatic event, but this is what happened in my world at the time. And I remember having my baby. And so I had a lot of supports back then as well. And I remember one point though, in that bloody delivery suite or afterwards, right? The room was so full of people. And I was just freshly had this baby. They all come out, they give us hugs. And then I had a couple of other friends and then like my mum's friends. And it was like so loud that I remember at one point I was just like, can everybody please just shut up? And everyone did. Everyone did because I was like overwhelmed with heaps of love. Absolutely. But please, can we have some peace and quiet? After I had my son, it made me realize I was no longer only responsible for myself. I was also now responsible for a whole nother human being, right? I was responsible for looking after this little human and bringing him up in this world that my mentality switched. My mentality went from, yes, this birth has made me a mother, but this birth has also made me a fighter. Like that birth was so traumatic and we bounced back from it, right? That birth was so scary and we made it through to the other side. Now, don't get me wrong, I still had a bit of fear because I was so young and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I'm smart enough. I don't know if I'm capable, right? Don't get me wrong. Those fears were still there. But I like luckily on the flip also had like these glimmers of hope. I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I am going to be able to make him school lunches or kindy lunches. I'm going to be able to dress him in cutesy clothes. I'm going to be able to grow up alongside him. And I also knew just how much effort this was going to take, just how much time, just how much energy, just how much of me is now going to have to be poured into my baby in order for him to grow up. And I mean, be the amazing human that he is today. I didn't know it back then, but my hopes were there, right? I was driven to do the things in order to give him a life that I didn't have. Yeah. Man, I think I might actually have to split this up. Actually, I am. I'm going to break this podcast up because the birth stories of each of my kids was so different, and I learned something so different each and every single time. So I'm going to anchor into that. My first pregnancy and my first labor and my first birth, yeah, it made me a mother, but it also made me a fighter, right? I was so freaking determined to shift our life into something different. I was so determined to make sure my babies didn't have the life that I had. I was so determined to finish school, to make sure our spaces were safe, to make sure I started changing things. Although when I look back, when I look back now, I see all the massive changes I made when I was 16. But I remember back then not really feeling it as much as I can safely see right now. So I'm going to park this corridor here. Stick around and you will hear some more. Okay. You will hear some more conversations. If any of this resonates for you, I want to know if anyone's been through like similar birth journeys or has a story to tell, or even if you have any questions, because I want to, like I said earlier, open up these conversations and really get wahine to see just how much we learn purely from our pregnancy stories and our birth stories. I really want these conversations to open us up because why don't we ever really talk about this? Why does it feel so taboo to talk about these stories out loud when it's actually such a sacred, beautiful, I was going to say ceremony, but that's not the word that I want to say. It's like a beautiful part of being a human is bringing a human into this world. So let's start having these conversations. Let's start sharing our womb journeys and what these rebirths for ourselves look like. Let's start being vulnerable and sharing these korero, these conversations out loud, because we're not alone. So many others will feel the pull. So many others will feel the connection. So many others will now know that they're not alone. Having a C-section at 16 years old and an emergency C-section at that was so fucking scary. Like, it just was. And I got through it, and no wonder it made me a freaking fighter, and no wonder I have so much resilience, and no wonder I have so much fire burning to keep going, right? No wonder. That experience has given me those lessons. That experience has given me those tools to survive and carry on and fight for the life that I wanted. No wonder. That's what I got from that. There are always lessons and learnings in every single thing that we do in life. So let's also let this be an invitation for us to see what we are learning on this journey, even through the turbulent hardship. Yeah. Anyways, I'll be back. I will be back and I will talk about birth story number 2 and birth story number 3. It might be in one whole part after this. It might be in 2. Let's see what happens. But if you like these conversations, please stick around and follow and subscribe and do all the things. Let's talk soon. Ep7, and yeah, I'm going to pack it there. Ka kite.